So, bro, we were able to make this happen. I'm so pumped for this conversation right now.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Finally get a chance to talk to you.
Yeah,
It's a great moment for me. I'm excited to spend time with you.
yeah,
I've
man.
known you.
You've known me forever, and it's interesting because I usually talk to, a lot of the athletes we talk to. It's just kind of the theme of the show. They're like either like, Division I college athletes, or many of them have played, pro sports somewhere. And you are not either of those, but you may be the best athlete I actually know.
Complimentary. I appreciate that. I did, but there is a little known fact. I actually did do a half a second of Division I athletics for like a moment.
At Vanderbilt.
Track and field. Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny how all these years I've never known that.
Yeah. Like I showed up at Vandy. I kind of was a walk-on, and they were like, well, what do you want to do? Well, I was always a jumper. And I'm like, can I try the javelin? I never tried the javelin. So they're like, yeah. So I started working with the javelin for a while. It was great.
That just so encompasses you and why I'm so excited to have this conversation. You literally started that with, I was always a jumper, which logically I'm like, well, then obviously you were going to do the high jump or the long jump. So I decided to try the javelin.
Count your steps, run up to a line, do something at the line, whether it's jumping or throwing something. I figured, I'm in.
Yeah. How long did that last before you decided you weren't a javelin thrower?
Oh, so I took the javelin home. Back then you kind of attach it to the side of the car. So that must have been a bit of a sight.
Yeah.
But it was one semester. And I realized, the Clemson guys, the University of Florida guys, the, UGA, they were going to hand me, pretty solid defeats. So I was like, I'm out of here. I'm going to go to the theater. So then I transitioned to the theater. I handed my javelin in, walked away from probably the best meals on campus at Vanderbilt, which is at the Student Athletic Center. And then went to move into the theater, which was a whole different thing.
Well, Vanderbilt, great university, one of the finest academic universities in the country, amazing city. But from an athletic perspective, and I don't know their sports inside and out, but definitely from football, they're pretty used to just getting their ass handed to them by the Georgias and the other teams in that division. So you wouldn't have been alone.
We made up for it by like having a dress code for football games. You had to wear khakis and a blue blazer. That was the dress code. So we weren't showing up with talent, but per se. Apologies to my alma mater. Anybody who played football, and played, actually our basketball team and the girls were amazing.
Yeah.
But you're right. Back then, especially then, the football team, suffered, but I think nowadays they're doing pretty well.
So theater, that's another thing I wasn't aware of that. Like musical theater, were you like acting, a little bit of everything? What was your specialty?
I always had an interest in silent film. Buster Keaton was sort of an interest of mine. If you know who he is, he was kind of a rival against Chaplin and Fatty Arbuckle. But Keaton did all of his own stunts. So, when you watch him in The General or you watch him in these movies and the front of the house falls down over him, that's him standing there.
Yeah.
So I was just like fascinated by this human who could do a one take film or do a several take film, have all this happen to him. And then there was no dialogue. He wasn't speaking. It was all physical.
Yeah.
So for me, that really attracted me and I wanted to explore that. So it was a theater film combo. And it ended up being a minor for me. But exploring that side of the arts, I had never done that. It was not something that I had, I was a basketball athlete. I was a track athlete. And then I was like, well, let's try. Let's see what this is about. So I did some acting, did some stage building, did some film, just exploring.
Yeah. It's obviously something that you've done your whole life. I'm definitely excited to dive into some of those things. So that performance side, like that's interesting, right? Because you started in the theater, you kind of said it was a minor. One of my favorite stories about you, fast forwarding a few years, when we were working together at a certain company, was our talent show. And I think somebody had gotten wind that you had a specific talent, something you had actually done professionally. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. That involved fire juggling, lighting stuff on fire, balancing, ladders on your chin. And you actually got fired and rehired. I think within like 45 minutes of the event. Maybe you can kind of recount that story for those out there that are listening.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. I hadn't thought of the story in those terms. I had forgotten that they had actually fired me on the spot and then rehired me. Yeah, that's a wow. I'd forgotten that story. Well, I guess one of the RVPs of our firm at the time, we worked together, right? And the RVPs had caught wind of this. He wanted to win, super competitive, and he reaches out to me and he says, will you do this? And my first response was no. I'm here to work, and I'm not a dancing monkey. But I guess in this moment, he was like, no, you're going to dance for me. He kind of pressured me into it. I'm like, all right, I'll just do this. And I put together this multimedia show, and it had this thing. I think I even had you and a couple of other colleagues involved. And the whole thing brought together an idea that I had, which was that we're part of a system, right? We are just cogs or ants on a hill. And at the time, right, this was 2006, maybe 2005, 2006. I felt that way a little bit because here we are in a sea of thousands of people at this company. And what kind of impact were we really making? That was a question I was asking myself. So I inserted this into the multimedia aspect. But I I start talking with people and I said, look, there's going to be fire. Will you support me in this? Yeah, we'll support you. So it came time to do this at the talent show. And, we start off where it's just kind of a people standing on stage and kind of creating kind of a barrier. And I had it set up where people kind of moved out of the way. And then there was me with fire devil sticks, 2 ladders that were going to be on fire. And I start this show and I light the ladders and I'm going. And then in the middle of this, I feel something pulling me. And I actually have a video of this. It's actually on Vimeo if you really want to look at this. I don't know if you've seen this.
I think I have.
I'm getting yanked by someone who has a headset on, who's being told, get this guy off the stage. And I think the conversation behind the scenes was that RVP was sitting next to the president, the CFO, a couple of, and this was $5 or $6 billion organization. And I think it was the CFO was like, that guy's fired. Find out. I want to know his name. He's done.
Well, so let me jump in here because I was actually part of the show. I think you had me as like a extra or something like that, and kind of helped you put some of that stuff together. I also lit something on fire. That was also part of my job. You had given me the lighter, and at a certain time you cued me and I set something on fire, which was unbelievable. It was a great show. So you come out there, and just for perspective for people out there that want to kind of visualize this, what you said, huge company, $6-7 billion company. This is like the annual sales meeting. There's 1,500 people from all over the country that have flown into this thing. And we're at like one of these Gaylords in this conference room, I don't know, banquet hall that probably had 900 people in it at the time, right? Like relatively low ceilings though. You're up on stage and you pull out these fire sticks. And I'm sure in their mind, they're just like, you're going to set off the fire alarm. Like the fire alarm is going to go off, or like something's going to happen and you're going to burn this place down. So yeah, the security came in and they were basically like, dude, put out the stick. And you were just like, no, I have to finish the show. So like, as they were pulling you, you kind of pushed the guy away. Someone lit the ladder on fire, 10-foot tall metal steel ladder covered in kerosene or something. Lights on fire. You lift this thing up and you're like balancing this lit burning fire on your chin as you're like holding off security that's trying to get you off stage.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that part when I had come off stage and they had actually, you're right, they had said like one of our colleagues was like, hey, you should do the ladder. Yeah. So I run back on stage and I've got this burning ladder on my face. It was unbelievable. The whole room has gone silent. They cut the music. It was pretty solid. That was like 15 years ago.
Yeah, it was a minute ago. That was pretty early on. That was
fire juggling. Well, talk about kind of the connection between Vanderbilt and this fire juggling story. I don't know if you know this. Maybe you know this. The way I got into that was I was at Vanderbilt and someone had offered me a job at a bar juggling. They had seen me juggling. Like, hey, you want to come work for us? So I go over there and I started juggling. This was a place called Good Old Days in Atlanta. And so I show up and I kind of, do some, juggling, and this guy's in the back, the owner's just, you're amazing. I was like, this was the most boring thing anyone could watch. It's like, maybe you'll give me some money and I'll learn how to do fire. Yeah. So there I am, like 18, 19, and he gives me some money. And I learned I figured out how to do fire. And that was the genesis. That was the start of how do you learn how to juggle fire? You get somebody to give you some money and you buy some equipment.
And you you legitimately like toured. You were like opening for bands. Like you were going around the country, like doing this, right?
Yeah. In fact, it was pretty cool because at the same time during the summer, you had to do a program. College those days, you had to kind of get an internship. And the internship I had was at Cat's Paw Recording Studio in Atlanta. Very famous, a lot of voiceover work. One of the top voiceovers in the country. If you really pay attention to radio or movie, there's really like 5 key voices, and it's like in a land where it's the same voice, and so Doug Paul is one of those guys. And he hired me to help do a couple of things, post-production work, whatever. And they had bands come in doing live shows on the radio. And, a band came in, Sponge. It's an old late 90s band, grunge-ish band. And I started talking to them about, hey, could I juggle fire. What are you doing tonight? We're playing at the Roxy. I'm like, nothing. Can I join you guys? They're like, yeah, come on. And that was sort of the start of some of that. It was cool. It was very fun. It's very different. And then that grew into getting on stage with other bands and touring with smaller bands out of Nashville. And yeah, it was a fun time to kind of like, now I'll come juggle for your kid's birthday.
Yeah. So most of this was happening as you were still in Vanderbilt?
Yeah, I think, it was a mix of Vanderbilt and then the year right after, that first year after. But yeah, mostly. So I did graduate work at Vanderbilt as well. So, most of it was then summertime. Yeah.
And you got your, I'm just going to preface this with what was your degree in Vanderbilt, like mathematics or something like that, right?
It was math. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
mathematics. And then my advanced degree was in human and organizational development. So group think, psychology, mathematics, and then an advanced degree in mathematics, a master's in mathematics education.
So, I mean, I've always just had like, just first of all, I just always loved you just as a friend and your personality and just the way you've kind of approached life. But I've always admired just your ability to like just start something different and kind of go along with it. I'll say this in a complimentary way, and obviously you're an extremely intelligent guy. You have a mathematics degree from Vanderbilt and have done great things in your career, but like there's like a Forrest Gump thing about you where you've just kind of like gone through life and just done these like ridiculous things where it's like, yeah, I was fire juggling for a while and now I'm doing this thing and now I'm traveling around the world. And now, it's like, it's really cool. I think it makes, just you such an interesting individual. Like when you were sitting in college and you're kind of in this part of your life, like, did you have, like, what was your plan? Like, did you have a plan? Like, I mean, I don't know if I had a plan at that age, but like, did the life you've ended up living, was that what you set out to do, or was it a little bit accidental?
Yeah, that's a great question. My vision career-wise at the time was, in the future, I'm going to one day teach and revolutionize the dissemination of how to learn math. Like I was going to revolutionize that. But to do that, I thought I need to have experience. I need to have worldly experience. I need to have interesting things to bring to students. There's a lot of math in juggling. There's a lot of math and a lot of sports, right? These are things I loved. So I thought I would do that and then bring it to the classroom. But then I left Vanderbilt at the time and, I did have student loans coming out of that. So that was a little trick. But, Greg, part of it was, I grew up in suburban Georgia. My parents were Californian. I wanted more. I wanted to experience more. That's why I wanted to try, I wanted to go from basketball, track, javelin, fire juggling, theater, a number of other things later on. I just wanted to experience everything life had to offer. And I didn't think it was Applebee's, strip malls and suburban Atlanta. And so I just kept searching for something more, looking for more, trying to experience more. What else could I experience in the world?
And just kind of took it as it came. It was like an opportunity would present itself. It was interest to you at that point, and then you just started to go down that path. Or not. And, one of the things that I think that makes you really good at what you do and why you've been so successful and been able to do all these different things is you've always struck me as a guy that when you get into something, you really get into it. And you're a very thoughtful guy and you spend time doing the work and the research and, it's not like a haphazard type of thing. And I guess the Forrest Gump thing's probably not fair because it wasn't like you just fell into these things. I think that they were really planned out. I mean, I even know when, you decided to do your trip, which we'll talk about a little later. Dude, you were talking about that for years. And I know the amount of research and thought that went into that. But when these is it one of those things where there's like an opportunity presents itself and then at that point you get into it, or do you almost, is it like preemptive where you're sitting back going, that's something I'd like to try and that's something I'd like to do. Let me start looking into that.
Yeah. I always found myself, I always had this mantra that I don't necessarily follow now, but it was like this mantra, like luck is preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard this, right?
Sure.
And I always thought to myself, if I prepare myself for what life might provide to me and I say yes to it, where will it lead me? So for me, it was a mindset. Like I just was like, oh, okay, is this interesting? Is it unique? Is it something everyone's doing? Because if everyone's doing it, I probably won't do it for long. I wanted to explore what are on the fringes, what's pushing the boundary of, I don't know, what's pushing the boundaries. And on some level, again, I think a lot of these things that I was interested in were on these fringes, and I don't know, like fire juggling. Like when you mentioned that right out loud, it's like, like you think of like a clown, but like if you piece that together, like I remember when I was building my first fire juggling kit, I did these clamps on a bar, and I lit these ace bandages, doused in whatever, and fires flying all over the place. It certainly could have lit, but I was in the snow doing that. I was in the snow. That was the safest area. I figured I should learn to fire juggle. I think it's just what was I exposed to? What could I dig in? What's got a challenge that's going to keep me interested? I think that's a basic human element. What's interesting, that's challenging, that we can continue to learn and grow. And I don't know, for me, it was some of the sports that I then started to tackle later on in my life.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's funny. I was talking to someone the other day, and it was a conversation about entrepreneurship, and they were just like, oh, like, dude, I don't know how you do it. I'm just in the process of launching another startup right now in a company, and obviously it's risk and all these different things involved. It's like, I don't know how you do it. And then, I kind of said, like, listen, everything I do has like a certain amount of, like, there's always a contingency, right? Like this isn't like YOLO, like fly by the seat of your pants. And I think this is kind of what you're saying, right? Like, it's like fire juggling in the snow. Like, yeah, it's risky, and you could kind of look at it as risky, but I'm also like thinking through, like, if this bad thing happens, what am I going to do in response? And it's not like I'm, hanging on a razor's edge, and if I fall off, it's like the end of the world, and I think it's balancing that risk with trying new things and experiencing new things.
Yeah, totally agree with because I think risk in general. There's taking a calculated risk, which is, okay, here's my Venn diagram of ability, and right on the edge of that is going to give me just enough discomfort that I could grow that, that circle of ability, or way out here, I could die.
Right.
Or I could lose my house. I could lose all my, so just in the evaluation of what, and the honesty of, like, what am I capable of? Am I ready to surf that? Or do I have to work my way, to that? Right. A lot of people would see that and they're like, oh, that's absolutely insane. But to someone who surfs 15-foot swell fairly regularly, that's not. That's just on that edge. So I think it's being honest with yourself sometimes, and that's not always easy. Being honest, what is your actual, what are you actually capable of? What are you, and where do you want to grow versus, if you're playing out here, also failure on an epic level oftentimes turns you away from what you're doing. Yeah. But little failures that turn into growth opportunities can kind of take your ability wider and broader. And anyway, I think that's an important idea.
You have to fail. Like, I mean, in anything you do, I mean, whether it's business or it's just life. Like, if you don't ever fail, like, that just literally means you're not trying anything new, right? Like, you literally are. You're in such a comfort zone that you're like, I'm not going to do anything outside of it because I am afraid of the potential of failing. I mean, it's something I talk to my daughter about. You know, I have this really talented 11-year-old daughter, and she's fucking awesome, but she is like a really competitive person, and she hates failing stuff. You know, it's like, and I can see how it limits her, because there's times where if she's not comfortable trying something, or she's not comfortable doing something, or she doesn't feel like she's going to be good at it right out the bat, she just won't do it. You know, she'll just kind of like shut it off. And it's like, it's having that conversation with her just to, you know, help her understand that like life is nothing but a series of failures, you know, and that's actually the fun part of it, right? It's trying something new, not being good at it, and kind of like continuing to do it. Like, that's how you get better. Like,
yeah, this is something that, this topic in general for me, you know, if you're a high achiever and you're used to being successful, right? Things came fairly easy to me as a young man. They were easy. Sports were easy. Basketball, soccer, those sports, my school was easy. One of the questions my family was asking themselves is, when I would bump up against something that I would fail against, how would I respond? Did I have resilience? Would I push through on the other side? And interestingly, I'm doing some things these days. I'm trying some things these days where I'm not having success immediately. And I'm having to psychologically sort of address the reactions that I initially have, some programmed reactions, and relook at how I want to approach this. Do I want to, is the goal to be the best like I normally have focused on, or is the goal to experience the growth, experience the many little failures, the many moments that happen on a journey of learning something that's hard, and being patient and saying, you know what, this may take me longer than other things.
Right.
Yeah, that's actually something I've been exploring.
Are these things personally or more professionally that you're dealing with right now?
Actually, one of them's a new sport.
Yeah.
You know, one of them's a new sport. I don't know if you've seen it, wing foiling.
Yeah. No, actually, what is wing foiling?
Okay. So wing foiling is you're holding a wing. There's a board. The board has a mast, and under the mast is a wing.
Yeah.
So I'm an advanced kiteboarder, and it should translate very easily for me to this other sport, but it's not coming easily.
Gotcha.
For whatever reason, conditions, whatever, things aren't coming as easily as I would like them to come. And I literally am a noob every day. Every day I get out there on this thing, you know, you've got to manage, you know, you've got leashes on your wrist,
sure,
leash on your leg. There's all this gear, this awkward thing. This thing will pierce the kite or the wing.
Who is good at that? I mean, I can't imagine there's that many people in this world that are like really adept at that yet.
It's a really new sport.
Yeah.
It's only a few years old. Great question. I mean, you know, the Kai Lennies of the world.
The Kai Lennies, of course.
He does all. He does it all.
Yeah. No, I've seen you. I've seen you with the one that looks like it's got like a motor on it, right? Or it's got like a propeller that kind of like puts you up on like a hydrofoil type thing. So this is like a version of that, but instead of the motor, you're now doing wind power.
You're using wind.
Yeah.
You're using wind. Which it's just really, you know, everything goes silent. You know, friction pretty much disappears because you're using, the idea is just like a plane takes off, right? Instead of aerodynamics, you've got liquid dynamics, and the same style wing is under the water giving you lift.
Yeah.
No matter, you know, how big you are, how small you are, you can still get lift. And then you're cutting through the water, so the water could be choppy. Anyway, and you can travel great distances, explore coastline, explore see, it's whale season here in Southern California. You can go see whales. You can see the dolphins, all the wildlife.
So how far will you like travel? Like, I mean, I'm assuming I know you're in Laguna, so you get out in the water out somewhere on like a Laguna. Like, how far north? I mean, going west, like you going out to the ocean, or you just going up the coastlines?
Well, for the wing foiling, I am not at the level yet that I can travel any distance, but I will tell you on the efoiling, when all these supply chain issues showed up and the tankers were sitting out.
Oh yeah.
Out at
sure.
at sea. And I could measure out, and I had just taken actually some sailing classes and nautical charting classes, and there was one about 8 miles out. Eight standard, not nautical miles because those are longer, but 8 standard miles out. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go out there. I want to see if I can make it out to this container ship. So I put on a big wing, put a bottle of water in my wetsuit. Told 5 people where I was going, and I just started out at sea. And within about maybe 25, 30 minutes, this big container ship starts to show up, and just sitting there, just no people, no nothing, silent. The water's glassy. It has its own vibrations, and so I traveled around this thing. And then I look back at shore, and I don't know if you know, but 8 miles out at sea makes everything really small.
Yeah,
very, very small. So I just kind of said, well, let's just aim in this direction. And many people said that was fairly dangerous, and talking about risk. And yeah, it was. But at the end of the day, I knew there's a lot of boats that pass that area. I also knew how much battery I would drain, and
yeah.
And I also am a water person, so I had some other options too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was like a 16-mile round trip, roughly.
Yeah. No, that's yeah. I mean, I'm picturing doing it. Like, it was, like you said, it's a calculated risk. You had let some people know, you got the battery, you got trust in yourself, blah, blah, blah. But there is something about being that far out in the middle of the ocean by yourself that is absolutely frightening, and I'm sure exhilarating at the same time.
Yeah. And also, with all those things, I was confident, I started at 10 a.m. I had till about 6 or 7 before, so I had a good 8 hours to figure out the problem if I did have a problem.
Right.
Right. I didn't believe that I was going to have a problem. So I wasn't pulling that towards me. I was on an adventure. No one had done that before. No one had traveled by efoil to a container ship, at least not in where I'm from. And I get back, and
one of those
just felt so good.
One of those drones that covered you the whole way out there and got Red Bull to sponsor you or something like that on it.
I wanted to do the Catalina trip. And someone got to it. The Catalina to Southern California.
Sure.
Someone beat me to it.
Bastard.
With boat support. 26 mile journey. But I did one full moon ride out there in the dark in Laguna.
You've always done crazy stuff, man. I remember you telling me about you going to do these night mountain bike rides out in the hills of San Francisco. And I remember one time besides the fact, just like hauling ass down a mountain on a mountain bike. And I've seen you ride. I know you ride like aggressive and you're like a legit rider. But I remember one time you were describing, like, you could just feel that you had like a mountain lion, like stalking you. Like you could kind of like see it. And like, as you're riding down, like, it's just sort of like, kind of like keeping an eye on you the whole time.
Yeah. Actually, I was coming up out of the woods, and I just turned off the helmet camera, and my light just shone uphill and was facing this mountain lion who was giving me this profile. So I was getting the full body.
Yeah, that's cool.
And my buddy was behind me, and yeah, that was a real, like, that's actually like a dangerous scenario, right? Like, what are you going to do? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
I am going to leave. I would
Right.
like you not to chase me.
Why don't you hang out here?
Why don't you just go there? This is a human smell, not a rabbit, not a whatever else you eat. Yeah, that was funny. And then I just started to make noise because my buddy was coming. Yeah, there are certain predators that I've run into that, there are certain predators I've run into in my journeys where I'm like, no, crocodiles. That's something I do not ever want to spend time with.
Yeah.
Sharks, I don't really think about them. I don't have a problem with sharks. I don't think sharks have a problem with me. I've run across them. Mountain lions are certainly not creatures I want to spend a lot of time with. Those are kind of my top three. And then I'm like, you definitely get the full high beta experience, that like fight or flight.
Yeah.
Kind of, like I'm good. I'm out.
So, all right. I want to get into the, I'll just call it the trip. And I was talking about you actually on an episode with a guest not that long ago, just talking about a friend of mine who had, picked up and did this thing that everybody, I think thinks about and talks about, but very, very few people are willing to actually make the moves and make it happen. 2016 was roughly? Yeah. In a situation and I know you during this period of time, and we'd worked together, and, we weren't working together at this point. I think I had kind of gotten back in the entrepreneur thing at that point, but, you're a tech guy living in the Bay Area, working for a major consulting company, make good money, working with some of the biggest tech players in the world. And, you decide that you want to do this thing. So maybe you can quickly give me a little bit on what exactly you decided to do and what that trip is about.
Yeah. Well, when I first graduated college, and you start collecting miles for the first time. You read what you can do with an airline mile, and on the bottom of, I think it was United, it said 200,000 miles round the world trip. And I just read that and thought to myself, whoa, that's possible. I could earn miles. So I had this dream. I just had this dream. I was like, okay, I want to go do this thing one day. And so I collected miles and miles and miles and miles and miles, and credit card churned, and, did all the ways. But, to your question, for me, again, it goes back to, I don't even think I had left the country till I was 20 or 21. And it was on my own volition. And I wanted to understand what else was out there. I think there's always a yearning in many of us to go do something that's, for me, I just wanted to unplug. San Francisco is kind of a place where you go to live a very full life. It's a wonderful city. There's a lot to do there. And I just found myself, I wanted to just go experience, different cultures, different places. And I was indeed at kind of the peak of where I had been in my career. You're absolutely right. I was doing really well, and life was going really well. And I said, you know what, when am I ever, if I don't do it, when am I going to do it? And I actually had a false start a few years prior. Where do you want to go with that? Yeah.
So let's talk about it. You went 2.5 years, right? I mean, you're gone. You're around the country. You're around the world 2.5 years. 50 countries?
Yeah, 50 plus countries. Yeah,
50 countries.
55 or so in the end. Yeah.
And you also, you had a quick stop back here, right? So it wasn't even around the world once. Like was it multiple trips? I mean, how did that work?
Yeah. So, I kind of came up with a rough plan of the first 6 months, and then that started to fall apart fairly quickly. As you start to say, well, I'm not into this. I am into that. Yeah. This is interesting. This is not interesting. And then about, I think you kind of are alluding into it in that question. Maybe you're not, but you said I kind of came back. I came back because we had spent some time in Colombia, and I went back to rescue a dog that I had kind of fallen in love with. And my family said, well, we'll take care of the dog while you're gallivanting around the world. And on that rescue mission to rescue the street dog, Kiko, we were held up by gunpoint, and we did come home to lick our wounds a little bit and eventually got back out on the road. But that's a whole other story. I mean, I can tell you a little more about that one, or I can.
Yeah, let's hear it, man. I want to hear a little bit more about you getting held up at gunpoint in Colombia.
when you put it like that, yeah. So this was an area. If you're familiar with your geography, Colombia butts right up against Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
And just in the north, there are trade winds that blow right across the tip, the most northern tip of South America. And it's a great kiteboarding spot.
Yeah.
It's like world class. Wind is just blowing up, and it's just very remote. The Guajira is the region, and the Wayu Indians are the ones that mostly have this land. Anyway, we'd spent 2 months there, and in that 2 months, fell in love with the dog. When we returned for the dog, I decided to rent a vehicle because I thought it'd be easier to move and to do the vaccinations for the dog and the deworming, all the stuff you need to do to get a dog from one country to the U.S. And it's about a 2 or 3 month process. So I'm in this, Toyota Hilux, which is the equivalent of a Highlander, and we're driving into the desert, and we had some friends with us. We went into this town called Uribe. We're in this town, and I just felt just the worst vibes there, and I knew the town from prior. And I just turned to, at the time, my wife, and I was like, we need to go. We need to leave this. So we drive out to the outskirts. I roll down my window, turn off the car, but I didn't turn it off fast enough for my wife to crack her door open, or crack her window, rather. So she opens her door. So I've got my window down, keys are in the car, the door is open, and I never saw it coming. But within 3 seconds, a gun comes around inside the door, pointed directly at her. Cell phone, cell phone, cell phone, cell phone, cell phone.
Shit.
I'll never forget it. I can see the gun now.
Yeah.
I can hear him. And the worst thing of that is I can hear her scream. That's the part that you just don't forget, especially someone, that you care, love, and you are there
to protect.
right?
Yeah.
You're there to protect. I remember two or three things of the moment. I had a money belt with all of our passports and wallets underneath my clothing. And I remember saying, whoa, 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 in a voice that I didn't like. It was just a different voice from me. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Now she's frantic. She's got a gun in her side. She doesn't know where her cell phone is. Later on, we realized it was actually under her leg, but panic had set in for her very quickly. I mean, she was in a very panic situation. I was in, what do I do next? And I'm evaluating it quickly in my mind. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? I see her go down to reach for, she has a little, like a shoulder purse. It's just kind of like about this big. It wasn't a real purse. It's one of those like shoulder purses. And she goes to reach. And as she does that, I'm looking, and she was maybe 4 feet away. I mean, the inside of that car is wide enough. I can just touch her, and I can't touch him. So she might as well have been a mile away from. So there's nothing I could do physically in that space. But the keys were in the ignition. So the second she starts reaching for that, I notice him looking at what she's doing, and I go for the keys. Flip that, turn that engine on, turn the ignition. Nowadays it's push start, but this was turn the engine. The engine revs up. The purse is being handed this thing, and I am stomping. Guns, arms, whatever are kind of like flailing, and all of a sudden we're peeling out, and the door is kind of, flapping. She's grabbing it shut. And off we go into the desert. That's the desert. And I'm like, I don't feel anything, Greg. Greg, I feel nothing. I don't even think at this point, I'm literally just, this is me.
Yeah.
And she turns and says, Michael, they're following us.
Oh, Jesus.
And I look in the rearview mirror, and there's a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Following us. They were on a motorcycle. One person driving, one person, the gunman or whatever on the back. And they've got it's not masks like today. It's like, like a
bandana thing or something like that.
It's very common. Yeah, a very common thing you'll find, especially when you come from petroleum-rich nations. They'll wear that to keep the fumes. There's a lot of gas petrol being moved around in that region. Anyway, so I hear her, and she says, if you keep going, they will catch us, because we're heading to the end of the road. It is the end of South America. I mean, you move into essentially the desert. The desert gives way to the Atlantic Ocean eventually. And I was like, you're right. And it's just weird to say this again, but I was like, I said it like this. I was like, put your head between your knees, and I'm going to turn around
and ran.
And I'm going to run them over.
Yeah.
They're in a motorcycle. I'm gonna SUV. I'm gonna run them down. So I got a hand on her. I throw this thing in, and it was like roughly a 4-lane gravel, like not gravel, but dirt gravelly road. So the vehicle moves nicely around, and there's no line markers, none of that stuff. On the sides, like, brush and sort of a cacti style arroyo, kind of space. So water has moved through the area, but it's not a place that you can kind of go anywhere but on the road. And this guy stops the motorcycle. The guy gets off, and he's pointing it at me like he's in a Quentin Tarantino film. Not like this.
Yeah.
Not in a proper stance. It's like he's been watching too many movies, and I'm ducked behind the wheel. I've got a hand here. I feel nothing, and he's on this side, right? The left side, right side's clear, and I'm barreling down on this motorcycle, and he's pointing this at me, and I'm expecting, I'm kind of behind what I think is the engine. I'm expecting shots. I'm expecting something, and in the last few moments before I was going to run him down, and my idea was to just go to Barranquilla or go to one of those other airports, ditch the car, and just get on the next flight. I was like, get out, and get out. we'll deal with consequences in the U.S. If I thought at all, that's what I was thinking. And at the last second, I saw an oncoming car. And the oncoming car split us. And so he points, the oncoming car comes between, nothing happens. I hear nothing. I get back to the same exact point where it had originally occurred, and I get stuck behind petroleum semis.
Oh, Jesus.
And now I'm doing like a 10-point turn. I'm kind of like, and then our friends arrive. Oh, hey. Okay, we're ready to go. And I'm like, oh, hey, we just got like held up at gunpoint. And they're like, oh, that guy tried to hold us up in town. And, she had her car running and 2 big dogs in the car. So her experience was she just left. Anyway, we got the police to come on the motorcycle with us. We convinced them. But they were out of gas themselves. So they pull over, and gas, the way it's sold is in absolute vodka bottles. So the police officer, give me one of those, fills it, doesn't pay. We get into the debt. We go further to see if we can find these guys on this motorcycle. We never find them. I mean, they're like,
oh yeah, they're gone.
Like dust in the wind.
First of all, this guy sounds like a terrible criminal. But second of all, after you were about to ram him off the road, he was probably like, dude, I've had enough of this crazy gringo. I'm just going to go do something else.
Yeah. So, if you're paying attention, Kiko the dog was eventually adopted by a local, and we didn't end up taking.
Oh, you did
Kiko.
Not? Oh, okay.
No, we didn't get Kiko.
Are you still in touch with anybody there or about the dog? Kiko?
I am. I'm in touch with a lot of the locals there, and they said Kiko found a loving home.
That's awesome.
That's great, and we're fine. Little PTSD for a little while, but it was quite the. Yeah, so we went home. So we went home briefly for a couple of weeks to kind of lick our wounds and kind of get our sea legs back in before we then headed to South Africa,
Jesus,
and Mauritius. But that was Colombia.
One thing.
By the way, I love Colombia.
Yeah, all you Colombians,
don't take that off your lips.
Don't send any letters to him. No, what I know on that trip, you went with someone. Your wife at the time, but you've also done a lot of traveling on your own. I think that's always something that I remember from you that quite frankly, I've never done. I mean, maybe I was just afraid. I've always, when I've done traveling, I've always gone with somebody, unless it's been work-based. What's that experience like, man? Like and I know there's other travelers and you meet people and you just strike up friendships and you end up hanging out with people, but like, how do you even approach that? You're going to some South American country to go surfing and you're just like, I'm just going to roll alone and I'll just meet some people and.
Yeah. It's it's a little tough sometimes. You get lonely, you're showing up and you're like, okay, I got to eat this meal by myself. But I think there's a huge difference, and this isn't going to shock you, but there's a huge difference between when you go with someone somewhere, you create your own you're walking with your own social network. Yeah. When you're by yourself, you open yourself up to be absorbed by other social networks. And that's, if you're an outgoing and open to new exchanges and you're doing something that you're passionate about, you're going to find other people that are passionate about it too. Yeah. So, if you're kiteboarding in the middle of Peru and there's literally 3 Peruvian kiteboarding spots and you're there by yourself, you're going to make friends.
Yeah.
They may be short-term friends, but you're going to make some friends. You're going to learn about what gets them excited. Or you're heading to Whistler by yourself to go mountain biking. People want to share that experience with you, want to share that energy. Yeah. But there are times when, you don't want to eat that meal by yourself. You want to share a beer. Those are moments. But if you can sit with yourself in those moments and you can be with yourself, you're only a better version for when you're with other people is kind of how I saw it.
What are some of the survival skills you need to develop to be able to do that and be safe?
It's an interesting question because I think there's a big difference between being a 6'4" man walking down a street and being a 5'5", female or
sure.
or even a child, right? That's a different experience in a country that you don't know. It just is. For some reason, presence is different. Your presence is different. You're tall as well. So like when you walk down the street, you're less of a target. So really, Greg.
But you're also a blonde hair, blue eyed guy in, a South American country. I would assume
True.
that there's also a target at least me. I could potentially with at night, maybe kind of blend in with a Colombian.
Yeah. Your Greek background will go Latin as well.
Until I open my mouth and.
Yeah, part of it's instinct. Part of it for me is trying to make good decisions. And part of it is for me was going to and I think you're kind of asking this question because I've never been to Paris, France. Like those aren't places I've been to. I've gone to very off the beaten path, typically third world, usually fairly remote. I will tell you what one important survival skill is to be okay with your stomach. Your stomach may not feel so good. You evaluate the people in an area and then you move on if you don't think it's the right thing.
Yeah.
Spreading your money out, simple things where you just don't keep don't take anything you're not willing to lose. Everything's replaceable.
Yeah.
This was one thing before I traveled around the world I had to really absorb. And I was reading this book, I think it might have been a Rolf Potts book about vagabonding around the world. And he's like, look, everything is replaceable, physical, except for those things that have sentimental value, like maybe, pictures that you had printed or something, right, that are one of a kind. But, you can get a better phone. You can get a better couch layer. You can get a better... So detaching yourself from the identity of objects, right, really frees you up because then you just want to protect yourself. So, I did before traveling, I did practice Krav Maga, and that whole mentality, right, is not to engage in combat or in a fight, but how to get to read the situation and remove yourself from that situation. And I think that's also, training your mind. That was part of training a mindset, versus imagining, you think you can do something in a situation. No, you want to get away so that you can live. It's our prime directive to live. So I think that just having spent some of that time was really helpful in this, the story I just told.
Yeah.
The Colombian story.
I talked to a lot of obviously athletes, and I've talked to, military personnel, special forces guys, Navy SEALs, et cetera, people who have been through, extreme situations, obviously on the military side, life and death. And then, even on the athletic side, like there's certain times where, you're competing for your livelihood, you're you're put in a very stressful situations where you need to perform in front of huge audiences, right? Like situations where, you're put under, pressure and there's huge tests. And then, you kind of talk about going into the regular world where it's like, okay, I got to pitch this, whoever it is on this particular sales day, or I got to have a conversation here or this meeting. It's like, how am I going to really get nervous for that? Because like I've done these other things, like in comparison, this actually seems pretty minor. Like what's the worst that could possibly happen here? Do you feel like that trip and the trips that you've had and the experiences that you've gone through, and I'm sure that there's countless other ones that are like the gunpoint situation, that now that you're just kind of back into sort of normal civilian world, that things just don't seem to be as big of a deal anymore?
Yeah, that was one of the hardest things for me returning back. Was realizing that I had realized my dreams. If you achieve your dreams, where are you? Where are you in that moment? Now, someone might argue, well, you didn't dream big enough. For me, my dream was I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to have a certain amount of financial success. And I wanted a relationship in my life that was, a committed relationship. Those were kind of the main themes for me. So, coming back, I've alluded to it. The marriage dissolved. The gunpoint incident was underneath that. And then I had achieved traveling the world. So I come back and I think to myself, what's left? Where do I go from here? That was a pretty difficult question to ask. And it was a hard space to face. But on the other side, anything that happened is like, what are you going to do? I've been held at gunpoint, lost what I thought was the love of my life. What can you take from me at this point? I had sold all my material possessions, except for a handful of, collectible surfboards and, the letter jacket from high school and maybe a box of pictures that we all have that are laying around. So you just can't get rid of those things. So, yeah. So that answer your,
Well, no, that's a really heavy concept. And I think that it resonates with me because I think it just plays so much into, human nature where, if you look at life as a destination, well, what happens when you reach that destination? Right. Then it's like, what, where if you kind of look at life as a journey, it's like, you could just take, the journey as you go and you just experience it along the way. I've talked about that a lot with people with money. They always say that money can't buy happiness. And yeah, it's true. Money can definitely buy opportunity though. And it can allow you to do things that you can't do without it. So there's an importance to it in our lives, but money as an end result or an end goal, typically doesn't buy happiness. And if you're sitting in your life sitting there going, all I really care about is reaching a certain financial goal or a destination, you may actually one day get there and then realize that you're still not happy, you're still not fulfilled. And I think that's really hard for people. Because I think when people who haven't been happy say, well, I'm not happy because I don't have this. And then all of a sudden they have that. And then they look back and they go, oh, I'm still not happy. So there's something else wrong. Right. I saw a documentary on Jim Carrey. This is what this reminds me of. Jim Carrey was talking about mental health. He was talking about like severe depression that he's going through and he still deals with on, a regular basis. So it's demons that he fights with himself. And it's like Jim Carrey has done everything he's ever wanted to accomplish in his life. He's been the biggest movie star, biggest comedian in the world. He's made more money than he could potentially ever spend. And it was like he woke up one day and he realized he still wasn't happy. And now you got to kind of like really get deeper and understand what the real meaning of happiness is and what you're looking for. So, I don't know. It's an interesting comment that you just made about that, coming back after having kind of lived this life dream, this thing you've been going for.
Well, let me share a little bit more. I think there are around 3 things that can happen to a human that can force them to reevaluate certain things. I think a medical thing, someone getting cancer, maybe having a car accident and having, the potential loss of your own life, something of that nature around your body. The death of a loved one, or people close to you. And then the third, that I think in America, and I think the statistic is fairly vetted at this point, is divorce.
Yeah.
I was faced with the dissolution of my marriage, and I didn't have answers. So here I was. I had achieved a certain amount of financial success in my mind, right? And my version of that may be different than yours, different than this person's and that person's. I had achieved traveling the world. I'd achieved a certain level of success as a surfer. I'd surfed some of the best waves, some of the larger waves in the world, some of the smaller waves too. Kiteboarding, mountain biking. I had been one of the best mountain bikers regionally in a local a series event. One particular year I was competing. I had done all these different things and achieved, and I thought I had achieved love, which was marrying my former wife. And when that ended and I was given no answers as to why, at least answers that I could kind of really anchor to, that could give me something to kind of go, okay, if I had done this differently, that relationship would have. But what happened in that moment was I then had to say, wait a minute. Who are you? Who have you been? And who are you going to be? And I had no idea. I just started pulling out guts and going, do I want to keep this? Yeah, I like this. Do I want to keep this? I have no idea. Why do I do things like this? Why do I react this way? I can't seem to get rid of it. It's been following me for 40 years. And then I found myself, and because I didn't know what to do as I was kind of doing this, I'm pulling all this stuff out. And like traditional therapy for me was not really a space that did a lot. Okay, it's great. You can find out. You can find out about how your parents did X, Y, Z in your life, or how this event happened to you. But it doesn't give you a tool to change programmatic behavior. It doesn't give you a tool to say, this is how I can be different. So the first step I took in that space, in that headspace, was a 10-day silent retreat where you don't speak. Vegetarian food, no exercise.
10 days, no speaking.
10 days, no speaking, an apple for dinner, no eye contact. The sexes are separated. Women are on this side of the facility, men are on this side. So you don't have the energy of the opposite sex. And then you're meditating for 8 to 10 hours a day. But Buddhism based. It's Vipassana, if you've heard of this. And in that space, one of the key tenets that so you can't read, you're not allowed to bring a book, but they give you a pamphlet. And in the pamphlet was one sentence that I just kept reading. And it was like, I am my own suffering and I am my own salvation. Imagine, right? I thought I was in the marriage that I was, meant to be in. It's dissolved. The trip, I'm still sort of in the trip, but I'm in the last like 6 months of it. My money's kind of running out. I've got to go back somewhere in some place. You are your own suffering and you are your own salvation. I was like, and I'm high verbal like you. I'm a people person. Not talking for 10 days.
10 days.
Talking for 10 days. There's a lot of garbage up here.
Yeah. So what's that like, man? I mean, you're obviously forced to be alone with your thoughts, and you have no choice but to just be deep in your own head. There's no distractions. There's nothing around you. I'm assuming there's no outside stimuli. That's what it's about. What is that experience like? Is it one of those things where like the first 3 days are like this, and then at like 4 days, there's kind of this like shift that starts to happen, or is it just a gradual kind of clarity that occurs?
Everyone's experience is unique. The reason you don't speak, there's a couple reasons, but one of the main reasons is to avoid the comparative experience. Meaning, oh, I had the best meditation ever. And maybe you had what you think was a terrible meditative experience. So now you are attaching a value to the meditation versus moving through the space. And this is part of the thing where phones and screens and all this stuff and all the interruptions of life stop the flow of some of the things for our brain. But for me, my experience, so if you ever do it, I hope you do one day. I hope you take the opportunity. But if you don't, it's not for everybody. But the first few days, it was like, the first day or two, I was like, oh, this is easy. I got this. I just got to sit and be calm and quiet. Day 3, I was like, when is this thing over? And it was just garbage, just garbage. And I'm like, an apple for dinner? And I had snuck in some chocolate. So I was just nibbling on it. Like I had this, and it would make me a little sick. Apples and chocolate, maybe they don't go together. I don't know. But I was sneaking in a little chocolate at the time. And, but day 4 or 5, your mind my mind started to settle down. And I got to day 8, 9, and I didn't want to leave.
That's crazy, man. Because I would have thought by day 8 or 9, you would have been like, I have to get out of here. But it's interesting that it was the opposite experience.
Yeah, I went on the other side of that, and and what what they do during that experience is it's about focusing on parts of scanning. You're scanning your body, and they're teaching you to scan to scan for the feeling on your skin, the feeling. The things we don't pay attention to when we're in, say, a verbal communication, but just to scan yourself. The idea, right, is ultimately create awareness. You're looking for the things that you have not been paying attention to experience and to tune in with all that is around and part of you. But anyway, that's the silent meditation retreat. It was the start of a journey for me, and
it's still something you do.
Great start
right?
for me.
I mean,
it's a great place to start for anyone who's interested in that. And they don't. It's not a charge. You don't pay for that experience, right? When you pay money, that's another thing. You think you're going to get value. You expect value, but it's donation only.
Yeah.
Even better, right? Think about that. Like everyone wants money for, 10 days. You're getting lodging, you're getting food, you're getting instruction, and you're recentering yourself. You think you'd have to pay for that. No, the idea is to take that part off the table, and it's volunteer based, and they take donations, of course, but you pay what you're willing, what you think you would like to at the end, if you'd like to. You don't need to, you don't have to. Anyway, yeah, it was a unique experience.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, man. So you kind of look back at your life, you're still a young guy, and I think you got still some bigger goals ahead of you. I know you're in another relationship. We were talking the other day about, family and kind of going down that road, which is super, super exciting. Like when you look back on your experiences, your life, sort of your own personal growth, what are some of your key takeaways? Like, what are some of the things you can share of sort of your own enlightenment that's happened along the way that maybe others could learn from?
Yeah, we get it. When I started to dig in a little deeper, my journey from the meditation piece moved to Sadhguru, who's an Indian mystic, and then ultimately to Dr. Joe Dispenza. When I moved through those other teachers, one of the main things I realized, and I know you've seen this with me, and I'm sure with you yourself, if you really think about it, programmatic behavior. You're going to hear this more and more often, but reacting versus responding. I'm sure you already have heard this, but you're going to hear it more. Are you reacting to the situation, or are you responding? Meaning, do you have a program in your system that is literally almost automatic, or are you choosing how you will respond, how you will feel, and where you're gonna show up or choose not to show up? This was something I learned only in the last 2 or 3 years. I knew that I was stuck in a program on a couple of the ways I would react in my life. I didn't know what to do about it. And I alluded to it earlier. Traditional therapy of these things happen, you had a bunch of whatever. Though that didn't give you a tool to shift, right? And there's a number of ways to address it, but that one's a huge one. Along those lines, as a sports person, as what you might call adrenaline sports person, I had an addiction to the adrenaline.
Yeah.
Of going bigger, going faster, going higher, going harder, achieving more. Achieving for who? For what? Like what was it? Because I wanted the achievement, or because I needed to feel a little more, right?
Yeah.
A little more of that adrenaline kick, a little more of that, right? Now that I'm kind of starting to distance myself from the need of the adrenaline. I still enjoy adrenaline. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, but recognizing there can be an addiction to adrenaline, which in the span of addictions, right? Like
it could be worse. Yeah.
Right. I'll and for those suffering from other addictions, that's not I have a lot of empathy and compassion. But for in that space, I recognize that. You can also see it for other, things like sugar and simple things. But in sports, I noticed that. Those are some, a growth mindset. I always had it, but I didn't give up on how to figure out how to do it. And most recently, I've kind of hitched my wagon, if you will, onto the Dr. Joe Dispenza work, which allows you to understand how the brain works, how the environment and how your thinking can become programmed, and then how you can then readjust that. There's a lot of actual teachers that will dive into that, but
so are these books that you're reading, or are you going to seminars with him, or working with him personally, or how's that work?
It's both.
Yeah,
it's both. There are books he's got one called I think it's Becoming Supernatural. He's got another one, You Are the Placebo. That one's a little dated now in terms of his research, but he's matching science with meditation. And recently he just proved he has scientific evidence of how meditation helps. And, this is the kind of thing that, the big pharma doesn't want too much emphasis on. Helps create resistance to viral strains. And guess which one it helps with? The one that's been most on our minds, or at least they're trying to put it on our minds. And they've got scientific evidence about the resistive nature of that, of meditation from a non-meditator learning meditation, not from an experienced meditator.
Yeah.
From someone who's never meditated before, learning how to meditate, and then being having the blood subjected to the virus.
What's the science behind that? What is happening during medication on a biological level that could make you resistant to a virus?
So it's the study of epigenetics, which is behavioral and the study of behaviors and thoughts and how it influences gene expression. So I'm not a scientist, but the concept is our body creates proteins. The proteins do various things. Stress creates cortisol.
Mm-hmm.
When you're calm, you have other protein expressions. And if you are in a stress state, your body creates things to protect you. When you're in other states, your body and thoughts, right? If I believe that I'm in a holistic state, if I see myself in that, the body doesn't know any different.
Yeah.
Right? The body understands. So I'll give you a great example. If I asked you to tell me what it felt like and to describe your experience of your first and last football game, I bet you could pull up the memory. You could feel what it felt like to be on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
But your body won't know the difference. This is the key, because the brain's there and the body feels what you're feeling, what you're thinking. There's no difference. Yeah. They're actually proving this. So the mind is actually so powerful, you can go right back in time, feel that experience, and relive it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If that's the case, right? If that's the case, then you lift that concept up and you drop that into your health. Oh, now you become your own healer. Now you become your own medicine. And I'm giving kind of the overview, but there are books, there are also seminars. I've gone to 4 or 5 of them now, about 5 of them. It's where I met my current relationship. They're fantastic experiences, especially in a world right now where being comfortable and being excited to live in the unknown, that's where we're at right now.
Yes,
a lot of unknown, right?
How's being back, just working, being back in the grind? You good with it?
You know what's interesting about that? I'm bringing a different version of myself.
Yeah.
I'm bringing, for example, I had someone say to me, "Oh, this client is such an asshole." Da, 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 da. And I was like, well, so I applied some of this work to it. I said, well, we're playing a role and he's playing a role. He's playing the role of the asshole client. What role are we playing to enable the role of the a-hole client? What if we played a different role? What would that look like? And now all of a sudden I've got a room of some of the smartest minds in the office. Going,
Michael, tell me more.
Wait.
I've never heard this before. This is amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
So now it's like, and people are open, right? Because, maybe 3 years ago, having these kinds of conversations might not have been well received. Maybe. I mean, maybe I'm overstepping on that, but you get the idea. So I'm bringing that version of me, and what's going to happen, at this point, right? Let's go back to our original.
What's the worst they're going to happen? Exactly.
So I'm having a lot of fun. I'm doing the best I can. I'm being who I am, and I'm enjoying it. This is a great firm. I'm back at Slalom, and they're great. It's about people, right? So yeah, it feels great. I love it. There's a piece of me too that also is like, well, should I start that, action sports business? Maybe I will. We'll see. I got time.
I love it, man. Well, listen, I love talking to you, brother. I've always enjoyed it. Going back in the days where I don't know what it was, like self-therapy in 2005 or whatever it was. We were working together and we just call each other up and be like, what the hell is going on around here? To obviously just being your buddy and kind of, I feel like sharing your adventure with you on social media and all those types of things and getting to see all those things you can experience, man. I definitely wanted to talk to you and just give you an opportunity to tell some of your stories. I'm sure there's hundreds more of them. But for the sake of time, we'll have to save those for another day.
Thank you for having me. I got to tell one, the way I met Greg, I met you. I don't know if you remember this. I met you, the company we worked at the time, had flown us to Mexico.
That's right.
You remember this?
Oh yeah, I remember this.
And they say to me, they go, oh, here's your hotel room. And I was like, okay, here's my hotel room. And you're going to share the room. I'm like, what? I'm like at the time, I think I was late 30s. And they kind of roomed us together. And I thought that was the strangest thing. I was like, okay, I'm gonna be in a room. But then we ended up being the best of friends.
Yeah.
It wasn't awkward. It felt like we were back in, at that time, back in college, sharing a dorm room or something. But that was our first experience.
It was 2000. I remember it was 2006 because I had my own company, and then I ended up joining that company, Softtech, which is a technology consulting firm based in Latin America. And they were looking for, I guess, some US based guys to kind of head up business development in these regions. And they brought me in to kind of do the, Southwest, and you were sort of the Northwest guy. And both pretty accomplished. I mean, we're early in our careers, but still like fairly accomplished, and they did some stuff. And then I think we, kick off, and they got us sharing rooms. I think both of us were like, what the fuck? What are we
We're
doing?
in Mexico. Like, couldn't you splurge for an extra room for us? Like,
so a funny story on that. They hired us, and we were like, it was a big hire for us. Like, remember that, like in that company, like we were big hires for them. Like they hadn't really brought in guys like us to do what we were going to do there. And it was Monday morning. It was the kickoff of their like annual meeting. I forgot they had some name for it, but it was their big, quarterly or annual kickoff. And it was Mexico, Monterrey, and they're flying in all the executives and all the people from all over the country, and everyone's there. And Monday morning, it's starting. So I fly in Sunday day, flying through Houston to Monterey, wearing shorts and a t-shirt and flip-flops, and weather hits, and it's a delay and a delay and a delay, and move your gate and this gate, the whole thing, right? So we end up finally taking off out of Houston at about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. This is just Monday morning, Sunday night, and land into Monterrey, Mexico. They don't have any of my luggage. So I end up going straight to the hotel. I don't have any luggage. We had our first meeting 9 a.m. and it was like the leadership like room. And I remember it so specifically. It was like this like round, like all the tables were in this big circle. And I talked to, you know, sort of whoever we were working with at the time, and I let him know. He's like, "Oh, just come. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it." So I roll into this first meeting as this guy that they brought in, hired in front of the entire leadership meeting in t-shirts, shorts, and flip-flops. So that's how I met the team.
Yeah. You were quite the, and you know, you're not a small human.
Yeah,
you know, you're a tall human, so you can't be missed.
No, definitely couldn't be missed. So, anyways, man. Yeah. All right, brother. Good times, dude. Good chat.
Yeah. Good to see you.